Yes, Mr. Johnson, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to another GRC webinar. We are thrilled today to have Mr. Barry Dequanne as our guest speaker. Barry is currently the director at the International School of Zug in Lucerne in Switzerland. Prior to Switzerland, Mr. Dequanne was the head of school at the American School of Brasilia in Brazil and the high school principal at Graded School in São Paulo, Brazil. With these three schools, Mr. Dequanne has almost 2 decades of experience hunting and developing educational talent for the top international schools in South America and now Europe. Additionally, the key to why Mr. Dequanne is so well suited to speak to us today is because aligning values and expectations during the job search is because he serves on international educational boards as well. Barry has served on the Association for the American Schools of South America. He has been the president of the Association for the American Schools in Brazil. He's on the advisory board of Advanced Ed's Accreditation and on the advisory board of the Association for the Advancement of International Education. So being on all of these think tanks is a great way for him to see the present and the future of job recruitment, talent search, talent development, etc. Barry is a highly respected voice in the world of international education, way beyond recruitment and job searches. And I strongly recommend that you follow him on Twitter as well as his blog. Most importantly though, Barry is the father of a beautiful baby girl, and he and his wife Haisa are expecting their second child, so he's juggling a lot at this time. It is the GRC's pleasure and my personal pleasure to honor my friend and colleague, Mr. Dequanne, as our webinar speaker today. With that, let's get started. I'll turn it over to Barry.
Well, thank you, Craig. That's quite an introduction. Grateful to be here. Thank you to the GRC and the American School of Bombay for hosting this, and Shitra and Mario and Frenny for all of your work and taking care of these details. It's really important, so thank you. Yeah, today you might hear some cowbells in the background. They're not fake, they're real. I'm in Switzerland and there's some cows just outside. It's a bit warm here, so we're keeping the windows open. Yeah, what I'd like to do is build on Craig's webinar that he did some time ago. And he hit on a lot of really important topics. And one of them I just want to take a deeper dive into, and that's the idea of aligning values, expectations, a culture of school. And I think sometimes we may overlook that in the frenzy of a job search, but that match and fit, which I'll come to in a moment, between the school and the teacher or school leader is absolutely critical. And so I want to unpack in a more informal way with you some of the key focus areas and hopefully engage in a bit of conversation. And I'll probably ask Craig to jump in one or two times to participate here.
Barry, I'm going to ask the participants to ask questions in the Q&A. I'll keep my eye on the Q&A so you don't have to. And if something is very relevant, I'll let you know.
Yeah, feel free to interrupt and I'll take questions as I go, okay? I'm sharing back the presentation. All right, a lot of this you already know, but it's just important to reinforce. I think when you're looking for a new position, there's really 3 types of values that you can associate yourself with. There's the intrinsic one, and for most of us in education, that's very clear why we went into schools, to work with kids, to make a difference in the lives of others. We're committed to learning and growth, to affect communities in positive ways, and seeing a longer view of what we can accomplish with our work. Extrinsically, that varies a lot from person to person, and what kind of rewards you get from this type of work. And then of course, lifestyle, internationally, moving around the world, different types of cities, cultures, schools, that's always a key factor for everyone. So all of this is within the framework of those 3 ideas. Now, you've all seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think whenever we're doing a job search, I think as a family in particular, as an individual, as a couple, I think all of these in this order need to be realized, and especially moving to a new country. So what's the match? What's the alignment with your physiological needs, especially as the world's changing right now with COVID-19 and the importance of safety, feelings of safety and well-being, love and belonging, of course, and then the school you're going to what degree do you feel that's a match for you to raise esteem, but most importantly, that self-actualization as both a professional and as an individual. And then I want to jump into a bit of Hertzberg's motivational theories that coincides a little bit with Maslow. And if you're not familiar with this, the hygiene part of this are what they call dissatisfiers. So, for example, if salary or working conditions, the building, things like that are not at a standard that's sufficient for you to meet your expectations, then that is a dissatisfier for people. But what motivates us, and this is really key beyond that, because if you add air conditioning to a room or you make the room a bit better, it doesn't necessarily motivate people more, maybe in the short term, but not the long term. But what does motivate people over the longer term and bring a much higher sense of satisfaction are these 6 areas: the sense of achievement, the opportunity to achieve, being recognized for your work, the opportunity to advance and grow in different ways. And in some schools, when you're looking for that match, one of the questions that I think is really important to look at is, what are the opportunities for me to grow? Can I teach other subjects? Can I move into some sort of leadership role? The work itself, of course, the responsibilities that you're given. In some schools are a bit more prescriptive. Here's the curriculum, you're responsible for teaching that. Or other schools, you're given more responsibility to develop that curriculum with a team. That's much harder work, but the rewards are much higher if that's what you're looking for. And again, personal growth. I think this is key. We are educators, we are learners at heart. We need to model that. And when we're looking for, in my opinion, a strong match of a school, it needs to be a place where we can grow and develop. Okay. From the school's perspective, some of the questions that I've seen over the years that unpack a little bit about who you are. Of course, there are the more technical questions about pedagogy and instruction and assessment and relationship with students, and those all have to be delved into at a very deep level. But there's some other questions that I think are really key. And this speaks to, before I get into this question, this speaks to this idea of a candidate being a match for a school versus the candidate being a fit. What's the difference? Often when we're doing a search, we can find someone with the qualifications, the experiences, the education, and other characteristics on the resume that seem to be the right match for what we're looking for. Then the next part of the process, and it's the more complicated one, is the fit. And what does that mean? To what degree is the candidate, the teacher, the school leader, a fit with that department, with the culture of the school, with the direction the school's going in, the strategic plan, the mission, vision? To what degree is this person a fit with the local culture, the host country, things like that? And then that focus on fit is much more complicated. And from the school's perspective, I think it's always better to hire by committee. And if we're talking about values and alignment, if I'm the only person that's recruiting, I have all kinds of built-in biases. Being Canadian with my profile, I have biases, I have blind spots, there's no question about it. And so when we're looking for a strong fit, it's really important that we have a diverse group of people interviewing and questioning, when possible, candidates for the school, to unpack that. And in the best scenarios, you have students, you have parents, and you have teachers and school leaders all participating in that process. One of the questions I really like is this one. Tell me something you've taught yourself in the last 6 months. And how people respond to that question will tell you a lot about values and the kind of alignment that might be with the school that you're working at or applying to. When I was interviewing for my current position, probably one of the best interview questions I've ever had in my career was given to me by a panel of students, and I think it was the newspaper or student council. And I sat down and there was, I think, 7 or 8 of them in front of me, and they said, "Mr. Dequanne, teach us something new. You have 5 minutes." What a brilliant question to get a sense of who I am and what I think is important and how I can teach in that short time period. So that's one example. Another example, one What has shaped you? And what are those greatest influences over time? I had a question the other day about who are the greatest leaders that have influenced you, those iconic leaders. And the response from another person, Paul Portman is his name, it was a brilliant answer. He said, that's too simple. In fact, leadership, if I get into leadership for a moment, it's really about us living through these crucibles of life, learning as we go. And this is what has shaped me, was the response. I have faced challenges in my life. How I overcame them, how I learned from that, how those challenges transformed me, were critical to my own growth. So that kind of answer is quite powerful. Tell me what you're most proud of. I think there could be an answer about building an entire new database, scheduling system, new program for athletics. It could be about relationships. It could be about helping a single child. There's no right or wrong answers to these, but these kind of questions as a candidate, you should be thinking deeply about, because it'll say a lot about what you value, what you like to accomplish, what you feel brings the greatest value to your work and to yourself, and to what degree that's going to be a fit with the school. How do you define success for the individual or a team? That success, I think, speaks a lot about what you value again. And there's a range of answers, no one or right answer, but each school will be looking for something a little bit different possibly. So again, something to consider. And I'll end on this one in terms of questions. Are families always right? Why or why not? So why is that an important question? I think it talks a bit about the degree of service and the role that we play as educators or school leaders. And one of the answers is, yes, families to a certain degree are always right, whether it's reception or reality. But part of our role is to respond to that concern that they have. And they may not be right at the end of the day, but that's a process to reach out and work with those families, build relationships. And sorry, last one. Most unfair thing you've ever seen someone do at work. What did you do about it? So another question that's for candidates to think about, because this will say a lot about whether you're a bystander, whether you're going to engage in trying to raise the value and ethics of an organization. Okay, let me jump into a bit of transition now. This was designed a bit more for leaders. It's from an article called Onboarding Isn't Enough, but this also speaks a lot to alignment and culture and values. So the biggest stumbling blocks on this massive survey of leaders moving into organizations were these areas. And if you look at the bottom, the bottom one's going up. Oh, don't know what happened here, hold on. Lack of experience or skill, disagreement over strategy, ineffective decision-making. These are more technical. But if you look at the top three, how the organization works, a bit of culture there. Misfit, so they get back to the idea of fit, not a match, but a fit with culture. Not able to build alliances with your peers. So again, trying to find someone with the right skills and experiences, I think is easier than trying to find the right match. Right fit. And the second part of this survey was kind of the opposite, where support was provided and where it was not. And these were so administrative, business orientation, legal, and procedural formalities. If you think about your own transitions, if you transition to a new school, our schools generally do a pretty good job of the administrative, transactional aspects of coming into a new organization. What is more difficult, and in many ways much more important, are these facilitating culture, familiarization, language acquisition, building relationships, trying to build a life there so that you're part of that community. And aligning expectations. I think this is something that's often overlooked when applying for a job and during that transition period. What are the expectations for that position? And I don't think you can talk about that enough or have that articulated in writing enough. And I would suggest during the interview process and once you arrive to make sure that's clear for you. Okay, maybe I'll stop there for a moment. I'll shift gears a bit. I don't know if there's any questions, Craig, or if you want to add anything to those focus areas.
Barry, one of the questions that's bouncing around a little bit is, all candidates and all schools can say anything they want. They can basically, read the script. How does a candidate go about testing the veracity of a school's position, and vice versa?
So from the school's perspective first, and you talked about this, Craig. Let me get out of the share for a moment. Sorry, more bells. You talked about this in your webinar a bit, that idea of preponderance of information. So for a school's perspective, you just don't go off the resume. You are reaching out to references, which is absolutely key. Talking to the previous school, reach out to anyone you can to get a sense of who that person is. You said something in your webinar I really liked, Craig. It might be 10 years back that you worked with someone. People have evolved and developed, no question about it. But those values, those core values and ethical standards, they don't change. They change, of course, and they evolve. But that speaks a lot about who that person is. So I think from a school's perspective, just preponderance of information. From the candidate's perspective, I think it's the same thing. You think carefully about the questions you want to ask the school, do your homework, talk to people that have worked at the school. I like it when candidates say to me, Barry, can I talk to a teacher at your school? Can I talk to a student? Can I talk to a parent? I always say yes, because I don't want people to come in surprised. I want them to come in eyes wide open. This is the culture. I don't want them to hear just from me. And so that's the candidate's responsibility to do their homework and not to be shy about that. I think if a school gets turned off by a candidate asking for more information or asking to talk to people, for me, it's probably not the right fit, but that's up to you to decide.
And one other question I think that is relevant to what you've already covered is, isn't it a challenge for someone who wants to develop themselves, especially from a leadership perspective, to maybe go into a school that doesn't have perfectly aligned values or has a lot of work to do, where they get the opportunity to build culture?
Well, what's the question?
The question is it always the right decision to go to a school that already has the strong alignment on culture, values, etc., or is there something to be said about going into a school that maybe doesn't have it and building it?
Well, every school has culture and values, and it's never 100% perfect fit. And in part, what I would look for as a candidate is what direction is the school going in. So that's one of the focus areas I would ask about. Where do you want to get to? And if there's no clear direction, or if there's no wherewithal to actually challenge the school itself, challenge themselves to grow and develop in new ways, then that'll tell you a lot about the school. But I also think there's opportunities there. So one of the things a candidate really needs to look carefully at as a school is does this school have a kind of a closed mindset, using that terminology, or does it have a growth mindset? And if it feels like a place that is really stagnant, it's going to be really difficult to change culture. That's hard. If you have to come into a school, and if you're going to be a department head, for example, if you have to change the organizational structure and some of the operational transactional pieces, or change culture is much more difficult. No question about it. So to what degree do you want to do that? The benefit, the value coming out of that is tremendous, and the rewards are incredible. But it's hard work, so you don't shy away from it.
Yeah, I think those were the two big ones right now, Barry. So just keep going. I'll keep an eye on it.
Let me put back the screen. So, and I forget who said this to me the other day. They were saying, for us as teachers, as school leaders looking for new opportunities, there was one common theme that was bringing schools together around the world, and that was climate change. It was just a common theme for all of our schools. Recently, that has shifted a bit to arguably 3 areas. With COVID-19, there's a health and wellness aspect, and not just your physical health, but emotional well-being. And this has really, in my opinion, has really highlighted the importance of the emotional, spiritual, and physical wellness of our teachers, of our students, of our communities. So it's critical to that. And of course, social justice and equity and freedom, and what role schools play in that. So I think for a candidate that's looking for a school, what are you really passionate about, and where do your values lie? And these are, I would say, 3 areas that all schools in some form or another should be diving into. And that, I think, for candidates, If you're really passionate about climate change and the school has nothing going on with sustainability, then that is either not a fit for you, or, to Craig's question, a great opportunity. And then the next question I would say, if you're interviewing, is to what degree will I have opportunities to take leadership here and implement a sustainability program at the school? So I think there's a really key 3 focus areas for alignment of culture. And then moving more to the candidate now, I think all of it starts with know thyself. And Craig really brought this out in the webinar too. If you've not thought deeply about who you are and reflected on your values and your own strengths and areas for growth and where you will be able to thrive, that kind of environment, where you need support to grow, all of us have to grow, that is really the starting point. If you've not taken the time to be honest with yourself in whatever format that is for each individual, then the next steps are much more difficult, I think. But you know that already. It's just a reminder that before you start any job search, really think deeply about who you are and what you want. That'll help with the process. The converse of that is schools are the same thing. If schools don't know who they are and what they value and what they want and what direction they're going in, the recruitment process is much more difficult. My experience over the years, having made mistakes and having done things well, the clearer we are in articulating a candidate profile, dispositions, skill sets, it is much easier for us to recruit and hire. And I don't know if the universe just conspires in our favor and karma kicks in because we've done the work. It just seems to help a lot. So I think that goes both ways. And then as a candidate, for me, it starts with foundational documents, the mission and vision. There's all kinds of schools out there, not better or worse, they're just different. There's for-profit schools, there's not-for-profit schools, there's family-owned schools, all types of schools out there you can imagine. And again, they're not better or worse, they're just different. They provide different opportunities for candidates, for growth, resources. And so I wouldn't dismiss any schools right away until you've done your homework. And you might be surprised. And I think Craig will back me up on this, but I think a lot of candidates go to the job fairs focused on one part of the world and 3 or 4 schools, and they end up going to a completely different part of the world because they were surprised by a school that really wowed them and thought, wow, this is a terrific fit for our family and for me as an individual. So dig deep into those foundational documents. I'll give the next slide is our school's mission statement. I'm not presenting it because I think it's a model. I'm just presenting it as a practical example. And if you go through our mission, we are a community of learners. So there's things here that would probably attract people, and there's things that are missing that people might say, why isn't that in your mission? And so it's not for everyone. So I think who we're trying to attract is that very first sentence, community. That we are not a group of individuals working in silos. We are a community. We're learners. As we're not just kids, we're adults. If you are looking for a place where adults are expected to grow, that's us. And that's something as a candidate you might be looking for. Determined to make the world or our corner of it a better, kinder place. Hard to measure, but it speaks a lot about our values. And do we always live up to that? We're never perfect on this, but we're aspiring to that. And we reflect our values in everything we do, make the most of opportunities, enthusiastic inquiry. I like that word, enthusiastic. We are excited about learning, challenging ourselves, getting out of your comfort zone. So, but I would throw it out to the group that's here. What's missing from that? And maybe that mission doesn't apply or inspire everyone. There's nothing in there about academic rigor. And some people might really want that as the main focus of the school. Not better or worse, it's just different. Our vision. We're creating opportunities for students to stretch themselves further and achieve more than they believe possible. Every student. That is a strong statement. Can we achieve that perfectly for every child? Difficult, but that's what we're aspiring to. And we felt like if we could realize our vision, it's probably too easy. And so we're trying to get ourselves out of our comfort zone. And we hope that sends a message to candidates that this is not a place where we're going to rest on our laurels. We want people to get out of their comfort zone, work hard, make mistakes, be creative, try new things, learn from the experiences. Craig, I may will stop for a second. Any questions on that? Or Craig, you want to add anything to mission vision?
No, no, but there is several questions popping up, Barry, about trajectory and how do you get hired for something you've never done if you've never done it, and how do you get that first opportunity? Not just from a teacher to administrator, but like you said, doing something you haven't done before. And then I'll look at the questions and come back with some ones around mission.
Yeah, it's always that is the question often for candidates, and from my perspective, I think what you need to try and do as a candidate is convince whoever's hiring or that team that you have the right dispositions, you have the right commitment, dedication, the grit, that you're the right fit for the school. I think there are a lot of qualified people out there, but not necessarily the right fit for the culture of the school or our value system. Again, not better or worse, they're just different. And so for candidates, I think your challenge is to get past the match part, that you may not have all the qualifications, but to show that you're a fit. Yep. And Corona Craig's favorite books is Good to Great, First Who Then What. And some schools adopt that philosophy. We're looking for the best people, then we'll find the right fit. And I think it's really exciting when you have a team of people that just wake up every morning and see the glass half full. You have a choice on how you're going to start your day. You can see this as a challenge and gripe about it, or you can see it as an opportunity for growth and to make a difference. And I think for a lot of us, we have an obligation as educators to be eternal optimists. We really do. And we're looking for those people. So I have interviewed, I'm going to be honest, I've interviewed incredibly talented people with qualifications and experiences, but definitely not the right fit. There was a bit of an edge that was not necessarily the right fit for us, because I'm looking for that spirit, that anything's possible.
And also, Barry, in addition to that, I just put on the chat for people, I said, but when you're looking to move from that sort of like teacher status to a mid-level administrator, you need to look for the opportunities in your current school. Go to your principals, go to your head of school, go to your admissions director, go to your athletic director and say, give me a bit of your job, mentor me as I do it, let me build a skill set, let me build some experience. And I also said in there, and please don't ask your boss for more money to do this. Because there are people right now, it's kind of that, was it Linda Lambert, Barry, that was talking about sort of like, what was it again? Something about leadership capacity building, where you kind of like trickle down, where a head of school gives their principals some of the head's job to do so they can prepare to become heads. Principals give some of their APs the job of principals so they can prepare for principals. And it just kind of like trickles down, but it's not going to come to you. You got to go get it. Yeah, there's no other questions on mission and stuff. We can keep going.
And Craig, just to add what you just said, I am a believer that if you're looking for a new position, make that public statement. Make it very clear to everyone so everyone knows. And then I always believe that the universe will conspire in your favor to support you at some point. If you don't make that public statement, people just don't know. And it's exciting to hear people are aspirational in their new roles or looking to do something different. Okay. Yeah, a lot of schools also have learning principles, and I think this is much closer to the heart for a teacher. And again, these are ours, and these are definitely could be easily debated by anyone, but this is meaningful for us as a school, and this is what emerged from our process with our team. And so learning at our school is centered on the learner. And that may seem like an obvious statement, but we try to make everything about the learner, not about us as adults. And that could be a shift, but that is definitely a culture of school, that is a set of values that we're trying to abide by. Learning is meaningful, challenging, emotional. Again, some people might challenge that, but it is. And I have to say, we reopened after being closed for a few months with COVID-19, and our principals and teaching team were fantastic in preparing our students for that return and our staff. Because it's just, okay, we're going to reopen campus, everyone comes back. It's not that simple. People have been at home for a couple of months. And so we brought in staff gradually and then students. And the teachers scheduled the first days to allow kids to be outside, be with each other. I have never seen such joy before. And that opportunity to reconnect with other kids, and it's just hugging each other and joyful and play and talking and yelling and laughing. Yeah, learning doesn't happen until you get that moving forward, in which our team, I thought, did a brilliant job recognizing that learning is emotional, and let's embrace that. Assessment, and then connected, of course. Learning should be connected, both in terms of our community and then connected to meaningful learning. And then this is a work in progress for us. It's not done yet, still early stages, but we are trying to articulate a candidate profile based on a relatively new mission and vision and learning principles. But these are some of the key areas that we feel are what we're looking for. There's also skill sets and backgrounds, and that's the match part. Again, those are easier to identify. But if you're a candidate, you should ask the school if they have this. When we get this finalized, what I'd like to do is just have this on our application section of our webpage. There's no reason why we just don't have this public. This is what we're looking for. It's not a good fit. There might be some self-selecting, or people just know what to focus on when talking to us. To Craig's point, if you're looking for a position at our school, these 8 things here, there's nothing about experience, there's nothing about qualifications. There's dispositions, there's approaches to community and learners, risk-taking, things like that.
Barry, I just wanted to jump in here and say a couple things. I think that, could you put that screen back up?
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think that the highly successful candidates are usually the ones that are most prepared for the search. And I've said this over and over again in many of the webinars before. Oftentimes the offer goes to the person who may not be the best, but was the best prepared. And I would contend that candidates should create a profile like this of the schools they're looking for and do exactly the opposite of what Barry said. They should ask the schools, what are you looking, this is who I am. Secondly, I think the time of COVID has actually changed the definition of several of these terms. I think to be reflective before coronavirus and now to be reflective in the virtual learning space are 2 different kinds of reflectiveness. I think inquirers and good communicators in a virtual world, by the way, great communicators in the bricks and mortar school failed in the virtual world to communicate effectively, and vice versa. So I think once again, a lot of schools are re-looking at their candidate profile for the next couple of years through the lens of, can this person work in bricks and mortar? Can they work in virtual? Can they work in a blended world? Because that's the place we're going to be living for a while.
Great points, Craig. And something you referred to in your webinar, the confidential search reference forms, the different forms that are used by different agencies. If you go through those, there's very few questions actually about qualifications, because we know we can find that match fairly easily, identify that. Most of the questions are about this. Impact on morale of the school, relationship builder, how do you react to feedback or constructive criticism, things like that. And then Craig's absolutely right, from our side with COVID-19, we're still trying to understand how this is all shifted. And I'm glad you brought that up, Craig. I think things are changing quickly. So, good point. All right, I'll move on. And then this is something that was brought forward by, actually, I think it started with students and a group of teachers, and it's our inclusion policy. Some schools have them, some don't. We are all ISZL. Next slide kind of magnifies this a bit. It was interesting. I tried to ask people why they applied to our school after we hired them, and try to understand what was the rationale. One of the teachers that are coming in this year, she said it was this document that I knew was important for us, and we put it out and made it very public. But this candidate said the fact that we made that public and showed that we are strongly protecting, supporting inclusion at our school was probably the key decision maker for her to apply to our school. And you just never know the impact that, from a school's perspective, this has on an individual. But I say that because the converse is true also. Sometimes you may not think that your volunteer work with an organization that's related to inclusion that may not seem important to you may be the difference maker in your application. So to that end, as a candidate, I think if there's a way to highlight and communicate what you value and where you spend your time and how you spend it and the difference you're trying to make and how you grow from that and how you get out of your comfort zone. It goes both ways for the school and the candidate. And if you're able to do that, then that helps also the school identify, this will help us move forward this initiative. Because one of the most effective ways of implementing change in a school, moving forward a strategy, fulfilling a mission or vision, changing culture, is through hiring. And schools are looking for certain dispositions or skill sets. And so for our side, this is something we definitely look at, without question. And we'll jump into questions, but I'll just tell you one more story. Recruiting wise, this is just my personal experience. When we used to attend job fairs, pre-COVID, if I could, I would take people out for lunch or dinner. And it was an opportunity to get to know the person better, but also we already dove deep into the technical aspects and the pedagogy and the training. What I just wanted to see is how this person interacts with our team that's there, how the person interacts with the person that's serving us at the table, other people, things like that. And it may seem like such a small thing, but that is going to translate to how they interact with your community. So as a candidate, I can advise you, every action you take, every email you write, every phone call, every Zoom call, every single thing you do, I can assure you is being scrutinized. I think if it's an effective recruiter, because we're trying to get a holistic picture, as you are doing with us, as you should be anyway. Your job, we are also being interviewed at schools. You should be interviewing us, and know that if you feel like your candidacy is a strong one, hold us accountable. You should always hold us accountable to that. So it goes both ways. But just remember that you're always being interviewed, even when you're not interviewing. And maybe this is the last point I'll say before we get into some more discussion. Even when you're not interviewing, you're going to conferences, you're meeting people, you're representing your school, you're representing yourself. We're not saying be false in any way, but do always think about putting your best foot forward, your best self. And I think that also helps planning for the future and recruitment.
Yep. Yeah. So, Barry, one of the other things that we've heard in previous webinars is about sort of our online footprint.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have our Twitter accounts for our profession, and then we have our Instagrams for our personal lives. And we think that our professional track is not going to bleed over into our personal lives. And again, not meaning to be judgmental, but people do look at your footprint, and based on a single picture, they're going to make a judgment call about what is that message it's sending. So again, I think Barry is absolutely right. We don't want people to be ingenuous, but we want you to be your best self. And since we do have some time, I think that I can open up. Mario, can people ask their own questions, or do I have to read these?
They will have, they just type it in the chat box.
Okay, so while we are waiting for some more questions, I think this is a good time to go back to Barry's last slide about we are all IZ. And I want to say, for instance, the GRC, which is hosting this webinar, we have just put together an advisory panel of people of color that are beginning to advise the GRC on how we can re-examine or just evolve our practices as a recruitment agency to be more inclusive and to promote equity and diversity. And one of the things that was suggested at the meeting a couple of days ago, Barry, which is very relevant to what you just showed, is requiring schools that are participating in the GRC to do a diversity audit. It is not to shame schools, it is to make schools aware of their lack of diversity or their health of diversity. And so that when we say we are an organization that embraces all different types of people, regardless of gender and color and sexual orientation, Do we really? Do we really? And will our data support that statement? And I think this is the kind of conversation the GRC is going to have at the leadership huddle that's coming up, is designing, there are so many wonderful instruments that are out there, designing one that would really work for international schools to test ourselves. And then, like I said, not to shame ourselves, but to learn and to grow and to evolve. The Black Lives Matter movement right now globally is really pushing us to think about this.
Craig, I can answer a question here. How often is the school open to offering a candidate a blended role, some teaching and some administrative systems and processes support as well? And do you often get resumes that are not pure teaching or pure administrative roles, and how does the school approach these resumes? Yeah, interesting question. I think I'll start by saying that schools are generally overwhelmed by applications coming in. It's not unusual for us to get thousands of applications. So I think it doesn't often help to send something that you're applying to many different positions, but it is helpful to be very specific. Now, there are often internal shifts, and things are always quite fluid in schools, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So I think my answer to your question is start the conversation with whoever you're speaking with at the school about your interests, experiences, possible fits, and you might be surprised that things start to surface as you have these conversations. Even if you don't have that blended model now, schools may be thinking about that in the future and say, okay, if we bring this candidate in next year or a year from now, they might be a very strong fit for this shift that we're making for a position that's blended for teaching and administrative.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the same thing. I think just be very public about your skill sets, your interests, and your ability to be flexible and do different things.
Barry, I was also going to add that both you and I and many of our colleagues that are heads of school are constantly doing something in the teaching and learning domain. And if, you know, and I've heard people say, well, I am a head of school or a principal at a really big school, so I can't do that. And I actually contend that the bigger the school, the more time administrators have to jump into classrooms because they have such huge human resource support. So I think, once again, approach your administrators, approach your leaders, tell them of your ambition, be clear about it, like Barry said, then the universe will sort of conspire and offer and say, you know, I've seen that you've been sending out these attendance reports, that you've been looking at all the data. I am a statistician. I would love to do that. Let me do that. What principal would not want to get that off their chest and give it to somebody else? So I think finding these opportunities is critical. We're not ignoring you. We're looking at the questions. You know, there's a question here from a brilliant young educator named Ricardo Vieira that I'm looking at, Barry. And his question, I think, is one of the conundrums, right? Do I take a sabbatical? Do I study? Do I get my PhD? Or, you know, when is the who and the what and the education and the experience? You want to talk a little bit about how that might play out?
Yeah, it really depends on the school and the recruiter, and it varies a lot. I think in an ideal world, you're moving both forward and they're in parallel and complementing each other, the experiences with the theoretical. And I think by continuously studying, you're really sending a strong message that you're a learner. And it doesn't have to be a PhD. It can just be taking an online class for free. It could be going on an adventure with a group of students, a learning experience that's related to the curriculum. It's just showing that you're curious and committed to learning. But if you're specifically focusing on a new role that is perhaps in leadership, then you should align your learning. And that is ranging from the formal, whether it's a PhD or a diploma program, or even a seminar that there's a lot of those going on right now that are really powerful and practical. So you have that side of it, and align it with your practical skills. And Craig referred to this earlier. If you want to become a principal, for example, tell your principal that. Ask where you can monitor, just be observing meetings, help with building a schedule. Don't ask, as Craig said, it's not necessarily a paid position, but you're looking for those experiences. And just ask for those and jump in. You'll be surprised at how many they are. as a school director myself, I'm really grateful people come forward and say, interested in leadership, love to do X, Y, and Z. Great, let's go forward. Simple as that. So I think it relies with you to be proactive, again, in terms of the skill side of things.
And actually, I can just add one thing by tying a lot of what Barry has said today, from your culture of the school, putting your best self forward, looking for leadership opportunities. All of this can be tied together when you find a need in the school and you come up with a solution, as opposed to just identifying the problem. You know, so oftentimes someone will come to me and say, Craig, I think we need to do something here to develop this. And I'm like, great, do it. Go. Make things happen. So I think, once again, looking around the organization saying, what could be better? How could it be better? And can I contribute to that? And if so, go and talk to your administrators and with a plan and say, I would like to do this. Everything from, I've noticed the congestion after school at the bus pickup. I think there's a better way we can route those buses. I'm like, okay, thank you very much. Now I'll figure that out. As opposed to, I would have been watching it, I videotaped it, I've broken it down. I don't think we're using our space appropriately. Can I go, I'm like, oh, wow, that's value add. And now you can actually talk about leadership opportunities where you took the congested traffic of an inner city school, you developed a better plan, you communicated with, that's a great story. Oh, I wanted to go back to Barry's slide about the profile they're looking for in teachers. Remember, when Barry's interviewing you for that profile, he's not asking you, are you reflective? He is waiting for you to show him with stories and anecdotes that you are reflective, so then he can check your references to make sure that those stories are in fact attributed to you and there's some veracity to that.
Someone made a comment here that these are IB, PYP, heavily influenced. We didn't adopt them outright, and some of the unpacking of what that actually looks like at a school is a bit different. But yeah, that was the, we're a 4-program IB school, so it's the IB has heavily influenced us in that aspect. Craig, a really interesting question from Laurel. I hope I said that right, Ramirez. Any specific advice for seeking a shift from a small school leadership role to a large school leadership role? It's an interesting question. So what's the difference? And basically for me, one of the key aspects of leadership, it's about teams and systems and how you scale that up. And if you are very effective at coordinating teams and working with systems, the scaling up of that is not the big step, actually. It can be challenging, of course, but that, if you're asking me what I would be looking for as a director, it's that. Can someone try, do they have the structures already, the systems, thinking, and to manage a team effectively? Can that be scaled up easily? And I think if you're a candidate, I would really highlight that as a key aspect of what you do.
And building on that, Barry, and also tying back to the question about moving up, oftentimes a principal in a school is looking for their first headship in another school. And oftentimes the board of trustees that's going to hire that, and you can, by the way, use my example, you can go all the way down to an associate teacher becoming a full-time teacher, a teaching assistant becoming, it's all that sort of stepping up. The board's looking for an experienced head. Oftentimes an experienced head in a school with a lot of human resources, as opposed to a principal who is running multiple programs and building schools and building cultures. Back to Barry's question, what is the school looking for? Are they looking for the title of a previous head of school? Or are they looking for someone who has the skill set and the disposition, obviously the passion to be in their first headship? I cannot remember the last, I have never been as passionate and committed to a job as my first year as my first headship, or my first year as my first principal, because you're in that space where you must prove yourself. People have bet on you. They've given you your first principalship. You've got to deliver. They've given you your first department head. You've got to deliver. So I think that there's some real truth in that.
Craig, a good question here about resumes. If you submitted them and you're keen in the school, but you haven't heard back from them, what do you do next? The first question, it comes back to the values, right, and the culture of school. Was there a recognition that you submitted your resume? Some schools have automated responses, some have personal responses, some don't respond at all. Doesn't mean the school is good or bad. It's just how they've dealt with that part of the process. but it could be an indicator for other things. So it's something just to think about of how they've communicated with you on this may be more meaningful or may not be for on a macro scale at the school. Again, I think it's hard for the schools sometimes. They're getting thousands of applications, and yes, things could possibly get lost in the pipeline. One strategy is if you know someone at the school. I think for us as directors, it's always helpful if you have someone that you trust that can give a personal reference. Doesn't mean they're necessarily the right fit for the school, but boy, it's a really important first step in. And then we go looking for your resume, of course. If you don't have that contact, then there is I don't think it's a bad thing to send a follow-up email, and if you can write to someone more specifically. And there's a way of framing that. And again, you are always being interviewed. And so I've received fairly aggressive follow-up emails that I don't think are so helpful. And I've read beautiful follow-up emails. People have taken time to read more about the school while they've been waiting, and they gave me some feedback about what they liked about our mission, for example. That caught my attention. And I said, okay, let me read this carefully and let me get back to that candidate. So a few different strategies. I don't know, Craig, if you have any other ideas.
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes when you don't get the job, you are a very, very close number 2. And the next time I'm looking for an upper elementary teacher, you're in my mind. So back to Barry's point about how do you close the loop of a rejection becomes the first step to next year's recruitment. Again, like Barry, I've received some very rude emails about, I think that you didn't hire me because of X, Y, and Z, and I don't think I was interviewed well, and I saw other candidates get treated better than me, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, well, I'll respond to that, but red flags all over the place because it was a busy job fair. We were interviewing hundreds of people. I'm sorry I sent that kind of message. So again, closing is the first step to the next round. So with grace and dignity.
And it comes back to what I said earlier too. We're at school, it's hard work being a teacher. It's hard work being a school leader. You want to be surrounded by positive people that deal with adversity in a constructive way. We're not telling people to not raise their voice and share concerns, but there's ways of doing that that can be supportive. We're trying to move things forward. We're trying to be optimistic. And if we have to spend a lot of our time managing, how do I say, very difficult, complicated, unnecessarily difficult and complicated situations, I think that during the interview process, that just raises a red flag, whether it's fair or not. It's a first impression. You need to be really careful about that. And to Craig's point, you may have been second. You may have been second in the interview process. You may have been the best candidate. However, what you don't know is behind the scenes, maybe that department needed a certain profile, and maybe there's a set of values there, or there's a culture there that you're not aware of, couldn't know. And so it often happens that the best candidate, or what on paper is not hired, but there's other reasons typically behind the scenes.
Barry, that's brilliant, because oftentimes in international schools, the spouse plays into it. I need a choir teacher and a physics teacher, and maybe the physics teacher was my second strongest physics teacher, but I didn't have a strong choir. Or there's kids and scholarships for the children. So there's a lot of dynamics behind the scene that you are not privy to. Yeah, well said on that, Barry.
And every experience is a learning opportunity, and it should always be viewed that way. At the graduation speech this year, I talked about life happening for us and not to us. And that's more of a mindset, I think. And so if you don't get a job, I think you should ask why you didn't get it. And maybe nothing will come back, but maybe there'll be a nugget there that will help with your next job search. And the person who receives that request, I think that says a lot about you, that you are interested in growth and learning.
Barry, I was also going to say that this entire coronavirus pandemic global shakeup has really shown people who we are. And you know, there's the Johari window that many of you are familiar with. The Johari window, there are 4 quadrants. One of them is everything that the candidate knows about the candidate and the world knows about the candidate. In other words, stuff you know about yourself and everybody knows. Next one is stuff you know about yourself, but the world doesn't know. Then down here, stuff we know about you, but you don't know. We know you're not an effective collaborator. You think you are. And then the 4th one is stuff you don't know about yourself and we don't know. And the only way anybody knows anything is when a crisis hits. And this crisis hit us, and suddenly We had people on our boat that didn't want to be on the boat and didn't want to row. We needed people that were willing to row. Let's get out of this dark storm. And I think this is the question I'm looking at over here. What are some key words or positional titles schools may be using for new roles? I think technology, application of technology, interconnectedness of resources. This is the new learning coach. This is the new teaching and learning. Because like I said, this is not going to go away. And even after a vaccine, we have learned so much about the virtual world that will follow us into the new normal. That I think start picking up these titles, start offering yourself to support in this area. Barry, we have about 5 minutes left. Why don't I turn that back over to you if you have any final words or if there's any last question you wanted to answer.
No, a very fine man, Derek Devines, put forward a question about how might you promote your best self while maintaining your humility. You know, it's such a good question because a lot of us as educators, we're just not good at promoting ourselves in an authentic way because we are uncomfortable about it. And because many of us are really good educators because of that humility to always grow and learn and be open-minded. But this is your time. And there's just ways of framing it that doesn't come across as being arrogant, because it can always be framed around growth. Yeah. We weren't born with a lot of these skills. There's a good expression that says, good judgment comes from experience, experience comes from poor judgment. And that applies to all of us. And so I think you can highlight tremendous strengths about you, but framing it in the context of a learning environment and a growth journey. Those crucibles of life, you face these challenges. This is what you've learned from it. This is why you have this skill set. But with every great strength, they're offset. We have offsets. We can't be great at everything. And that's another way to tackle that and say, yeah, these are my greatest strengths. I'm solid at these. And to frame that in a reasonable way also is helpful.
Well, actually, I think it's very poetic to end with the question from Derek Devines for two reasons. Because Derek is probably one of the best performing, humble people that both Barry and I have worked with. Secondly, he is going to be hosting a webinar for the GRC in a couple of weeks. So tune in to Derek Devines' webinar coming up next. I don't know which, I think someone just said, yeah, no, yeah. The 24th of July is Derek Devines. The 17th of July is Rich Bonner, the head of the Graded School in São Paulo. We hope that you are finding value in these webinars. Keep coming to them. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram. And Mr. Dequanne, a pleasure to spend an hour with you, my friend. Thank you for inspiring and educating us.
My pleasure. I always learn a lot from doing these myself. So thanks for the really good questions. And it's just really nice to connect with everyone here today. So wishing everyone health and wellness.
Thank you all for coming. We are signing out. Recording will stop.